Am I the only one paying attention to wine aromas? You know, these elusive perceptions you detect when smelling a glass of wine. A recent discussion with a winemaker made me wonder. This is what he said when I was probing him on the importance of wine aromas and flavors to guide his craft, since apparently I'm fascinated by the complexity of wine aromas. He said, I feel like flavors and aromas are so prone to that BS debate analysis that I focus on the taste and the structure because it's more standard. It's an easier language to converse with. It's an easier sound to create the composition with. So yes, Isabelle, you're biased. Yes, I'm biased, having been trained as a sensory scientist specializing in flavors. But when I see participants in my sensory tastings, when they discover the evocative power of wine aromas, I feel obliged to bring back our sense of smell and wine aromas to the center of our wine appreciation and enjoyment. So if you too wonder whether you should ditch wine aromas from our wine vocabulary, or like me, if you rely heavily on aromatics to evaluate a wine, this episode is for you. Welcome to today's episode of We Taste Wine Differently, the podcast designed to help wine professionals connect with modern wine consumers through the power of sensory experiences. I'm your host, Isabelle Lesschaeve, wine sensory scientist, educator, and tasting coach. Wine aromas. Should we discuss wine aromas at all when tasting wine among professionals or when presenting wines to customers? There has been a lot of discussion, chit-chat in the past few years regarding the wine language used by professionals, especially the language taught in certification programs. Exclusive, British-centric, Westerner, and not at all consumer-friendly are the most common criticisms. I agree that some of these terms are culturally dependent and not meaningful to many non-Western tasters. For example, I didn't know what butterscotch was until I moved to the US. But are these arguments sufficient enough to dismiss the importance of aromas in our wine experiences? I noticed two schools of thought. The one arguing that texture and structure are critical characteristics that professionals should focus on, like the winemaker I referred to earlier on, believing that the texture language is more standard. The other camp, perhaps made solely of sensory scientists, who knows, argues that all sensory modalities are important to characterize a wine. Therefore, aroma is important to report on. In today's episode, I will tell you first why aromas are more important than one thinks for wine professionals. And second, the one simple reason why wine pros are challenged by describing wine aromas, like many people. And third, I will give you a simple framework to get over that universal hurdle and, of course, a free resource to practice this framework. So listen till the end of this episode to grab this free resource. But first, let's define aromas. To me, a wine aroma is evoked by the perception of one or more volatile compounds. These compounds are very small molecules that are detected on the olfactory epithelium at the top of our nostrils. They generate an electric signal that is routed to the olfactory bulb and the higher central areas in our brain, where the signal is interpreted. If you have encountered that signal before, your brain may identify it. If you haven't, you may become curious about what it is. And that's how we learned. Wine professionals like to segment aromas into three categories: primary, secondary, or tertiary, depending on the aroma's known origins. Primary produced in the berry, secondary produced during fermentation, winemaking, and tertiary produced during maturation and aging. But to flavor chemists, an aroma is evoked by volatile compounds, period. And so I have learned. So when I'm talking about wine aromas, I'm talking about any category of aromas, not just primary, secondary, or tertiary. Any aromas that your nose detects and your brain interprets. I just wanted to clarify. Now, I'm amazed by the number of wine enthusiasts I meet who have never heard about the two ways we detect aromas. Have you? Let's make sure we're on the same page here because it's not a well-known fact, actually. We detect aromas in two ways. The direct route, when we smell wines directly from the glass, and the indirect route, when the wine is in your mouth. As you breathe, the volatile compounds reach the olfactory detectors through the retronasal pathway at the back of the mouth. What most normal people qualify as taste is, in fact, an aromatic perception. That's one reason why wine aromas are so critical to our enjoyment. They contribute in large part of the flavor perceptions we have when we sip some wine. Flavor combines the perceptions of taste, the basic taste of sweet, acid, salt, bitter, and umami, the texture or mouthfeel, the sensation related to chemestasis that we experience in the mouth, and the aromatic components, the aromas. So the overall flavor of wine is our brain's interpretation of the interplay between these three major wine components. Therefore, aromatic perceptions in mouth are important to consumers' enjoyment and cannot be ignored. Gordon Shepherd, the author of the book Neuroenology, wrote early in this book, and I quote, "Wine is a food that is consumed almost entirely for its flavor, since it has no real nutritional value." So wine aromas significantly contribute to our overall enjoyment of wine, which is a personal experience. Does it mean wine aromas are not crucial to mention in professional evaluations? My answer is yes, they are crucial to mention in a professional evaluation, and for two reasons. First, to assess the typicality of certain wine styles, if typicality is an asset valued in your wine marketing. And second, to identify off flavors, faults, and taints that make the wine non-commercializable. Aromatic typicity or typicality makes a wine style distinct and identifiable. Some wine styles have signature aromas that producers may want to keep consistent across production batches because it's part of their brand equity. For example, tropical fruits or grapefruits or boxwood in Sauvignon Blanc, black cherry in Pinot Noir, rose in Gewürztraminer. Despite people's different interpretations of these signature aromas, there must be consistency internally to define what these aromatic notes smell like. The use of physical aroma standards is therefore critical in that respect. Off-flavor is another reason, and off-flavor training should be mandatory in all wine certifications. Most enology programs at the college or university levels offer such training in the enology class or the sensory course. But what about hospitality programs? Even if you learn the origins of these off notes in your courses, being able to spot them in a wine, knowing your blind spot, is non-negotiable. I discussed blind spot with my last guest, Dr. Hildegard Heyman, professor at UC Davis, and you can refer to our discussion and why knowing your blind spots are critical. Refer to episode 8. Let's pause here. To recap, wine aromas are an important component of flavor, the reason why many wine lovers enjoy consuming wines. Aromas have been used as a differentiating factor for marketing certain varietal styles, and when wine processing goes wrong, it leads to the production of off flavors. So why do wine pros argue more and more that aromas are not that important, that we shouldn't talk about it or describe it to communicate? Because we don't have a universal inclusive language to describe aromas? I get it. We need to find better ways to communicate more effectively what sensory experiences consumers can expect when they buy, a bottle of wine. And I can help you with that. There are lots of tools and techniques to make sure that the liquid sensory benefits are communicated through your communication or even through the labels. But to me, the fundamental reason why wine professionals are uncomfortable describing wine aroma is simple. Like many of us, they never learn to describe smells. We, again, all of us, have never learned at school to pay attention to smells, scents, fragrances, maybe only when it was unpleasant. We learned a lot of things to recognize shapes and colors, but not smells or even taste for that matter. Pascaline Lepelletier, the world-renowned French sommelier, shared this hard truth during her keynote at the Pangborn Sensory Symposium in 2023. She said nobody ever taught us how to use our sense of smell. And that's probably why many professionals use texture and basic taste to evaluate wine. These components seem easier to identify, although we could have another episode on how texture attributes are challenging to agree upon in sensory evaluations. But yes, texture and basic taste are less elusive, they might be more familiar, and probably easier to identify, the more you taste wine and the more you're exposed to wine. But the good news for aromas is that it's never too late to learn how to pay attention to scents and develop your sense of smell and aroma language. So how can you start? And the answer is deceivingly easy. You have to listen to your nose every day. That's what my friend and mentor, Dr. Anne Noble, has told her students and anyone willing to listen. It's about paying attention to the scent in your environment daily. And I'm going to share a simple framework with you. I call it the N.O.S.E Framework, each letter representing a step to follow. So here's what you're going to do. Every day, when a scent reaches your nose, you will have first to notice it. So N, notice the smell. Then you will observe the source of the smell. So O, observe the source of the smell so that you can link the source and the scent. And then smell again, associating the scent and the source. And E stands for encode. It's about doing a task to memorize this association. And the best task is to write about the experience you just had. But you can also doodle if it is your thing. And if in the moment writing isn't convenient, take a photo of the source with your phone and record a short voice memo. Be creative, because it's a very important step in the N.O.S.E process to memorize and therefore remember the scent and the name later when maybe you will encounter it in your glass of wine. Do this every day for a week. And if you're not convinced, let me tell you about Bob. I just want to share how effective this single practice is. Bob did it for a few days and shared that with me. One of the key learning moments thus far has been to recognize that for the most part, I have been ignoring the aromas around me, hence losing the opportunity to broaden my repertoire of scent associations. He mentioned to have never paid attention to smells outside of his kitchen because that's what we're told, pay attention to the spices and the smells of food. But paying attention to the scents and fragrances outside of your kitchen is also important. Then his garage revealed a whole more sensory discoveries. And to bring you context, Bob is not a normal wine consumer, what we would call a naive consumer. He's a very talented winemaker, a wine judge, and a wine educator. So, if you have been struggling describing wine aromas, train your nose, listen to it every day. I've created a journal for you to take notes, especially the encoding part. It will help you memorize the association between the scent, the object source, and the name you associated with it. I added a link to the journal in the show notes, and you can do that for a week, or as long as you want. The N.O.S.E Framework is one of the techniques I teach in my masterclass, Ignite Your Sense of Smell, Create Your Wine Aroma Training Blueprint in 4 weeks. If you're interested, registration is coming soon, and you can join the priority list to be first notified when the masterclass doors open. You will find the link to join the priority list in the show notes. All right, I hope by now I have provided enough arguments to put wine aromas back at the center stage of your attention when it comes to wine characterization. Wine aromas are part of the flavor experience that wine will create. While I agree we need more consumer-friendly ways to communicate wine sensory benefits to consumers, wine professionals also need to be able to describe wine aromas with a defined language. And this will be the topic of a coming episode on how to define and learn this technical language that is not the technical language that you're used to, that is the sensory language of wine. But before that, you need to awaken your sense of smell. And I gave you today a simple framework, the N.O.S.E Framework, to start paying attention to your olfactive environment. So practice, practice, practice. That's the first step to take. And that's it for today's episode of We Taste Wine Differently. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a review to help others discover the podcast. If you want to learn more about how I can help you and your team implement a sensory-driven tasting experience, visit my website at InnoVinum.com. That's InnoVinum, INNOVINUM.com. Thank you and à bientôt!